Hi everyone, myself Dr. M. Lakshmi Prasad, working as an Associate Professor in the Department of Data Science in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. In this video, I am going to discuss about data pre-processing. So how the data is going to be pre-processed once I can able to collect the data from the multiple sources like primary source and secondary sources. So before that, I have to explain about data processing. So how the data processing is to be done. So what are the various phases that are available for processing the data. So very first one is that innovation. So once the innovation is done, that means we are able to collecting the data from multiple sources and what kind of data it is, whether it is qualitative data or quantitative data. So then what are the variables I can able to predict it. So like that, we have to do all the innovation things. So once the innovation is done, then that data is going to be sent to the data management cycle. So where that data what we collected, so that one is going to be characterized, so based on the type of the data, and then how we're going to manage its types of variables, what they are assigned, like that I have to see it. So once the data management is done, then the production will go to that phase. So in production phase, the data is going to be produced, and then so once the data is produced, then the final results are going to be implemented here. So once the result is generated, again those results are again sent back to the innovation phase again. So whether we're going to get the correct results or not. So any mismatch is there, any data is missed, or any inconsistencies are available in the data, and then any null values are getting, like that we are going to analyze it after getting the results. So once if we are going to identify that kind of data is available in the results, again that data is going to send back to the again data management phase again. So that data management person able to eliminate all those things. So what data is missing, and then any inconsistencies are available, or any duplicate data is getting, that one is going to be eliminated in data management again. That data is going to be sent back to the production phase. That so once the production phase is produced, then again that production manager can able to publish the results again. So then like that the results are going to be generated. So like that this should be a cyclic process how the data is going to be processed. So next one is the data processing introduction. So here the data after collection has to be prepared for the analysis. So in order to make the analysis, first of all, we have to collect the data here. So once the data is collected, that should be a raw one, and it must undergo some processing before analysis. So what are the data I'm getting, right? So from multiple sources, like it be primary source or secondary source, that means some various techniques are available in order to get the data from the multiple sources, right? So in order to get that, so that data should be in raw one, and that data compulsory undergone for processing, so before the analysis is to be carried out. Then the result of analysis is going to be affected by a lot by the form of the data. Some data will become in the form of one format, and some other data will may become in the form of other format, right? So in order to get it, so the results may be definitely affected. So since the data is going to be get from multiple sources, so we have to combine it and put it in a single form or single format. We have to put it. So for that, processing data is very must, and then we have to produce the very effective result, or we have to produce the reliable result. Then objectives of data processing here. So data processing objectives will be checking the questionnaires and then schedules. So this is the very first objective. So what kind of questionnaire that can able to ask that for the respondents, and then what are the schedules are had to be done, and then what kind of questions but have to ask for the respondents to get the original data for collecting the data. So once that questionnaire is to be done, and then the next objective will be reduction of the mass data to a manageable portion. So since we are going to asking so many questionnaires to get the data, right? Suppose for example, if I'm going to ask some 100 questionnaires, I can able to get some 100 number of data here. So I have to reduce it to a simple one, and then that should be in a manageable one. So once that one is done, so next objective should be the summing up of all the materials what I get it, and then prepare the tables, charts, graphs, and then various groupings and other breakdowns for presenting the results. So what is the data I'm getting from it, right? So that is manageable one. So that one is going to be presented either in the form of tables. So or I can able to represent the data in the form of charts, or I can able to represent the data in the form of graphs like pie graph, bar graph, right? And then various some other various groupings I can able to do it, and then what where have to break down with that results, and then where have to present that result, and all that and all have to be very careful here. And then if the result is going getting some any errors and all, then the minimizing the errors is very important, so which may be creep in at various stages of the survey. So just now I said there may be different types of phases, right? So that errors are going to be eliminated, so once we recycle that data processing phases and all. Then next one we are going to see about what are the various types of data processing here. So then we are having different types of data processing. Very first one is here is manual data processing. So how the data is going to be processed manually. So here in order to implement this, so definitely some human intervention is going to be there in order to perform that manual data processing. And then we should may also implies many chances of errors may come since we are doing manually, such as delays in the data capture, and then high amount of operator misprints. Like this we are going to get some different types of errors. So delays in data capture, so while questionnaire, so some may be some time delays will be there while writing up manually, and then capturing the data what the respondent is telling and all, and then high amount of operator misprint. Sometimes we can able to note the some other wrong data also in due to hurriness and all. So this may also may lead to the disadvantages of this manual data processing. And then it may also implies high labor expenses. So since we are going to get the data manually, so a lot of people may involve in order to get the data manually from multiple sources. In this regard, we can able to spend a lot of amount for the equipment, and then supplies, rents, etc. Right. So manual data processing is the very first one, so where a human intervention is going to be involved here, and then there may be a chance for errors, that may be a delays in the data capture or high amount of operator misprints and all. And then it may also implies high labor expenses going to be due in this regard. So we have to spend some amount for the equipment, and then supplies, rent, etc. And then next data processing will be mechanical data processing. So how the data processing is to be done through some mechanical devices like calculators, machines and all. So different calculations and the processing are going to be performed here, and then that should be done through some mechanical machines like calculators and then all. And then the use of this mechanical machines makes the data processing easier, and then less time consuming process also, since we are using some mechanical machines, so that the data processing will be a little bit easy when compared to the manual data processing. And then the time consuming will also be very less when compared to the manual data processing. And then when it comes to this mechanical data processing, the chances of errors should also become very less when compared to the manual data processing. So these are the various advantages of this mechanical data processing. So here In mechanical data processing, there may be different calculations are to be done. So in order to do that, definitely we need some mathematical machines and all. And then for processing that, we need some machines like calculator. And then the use of this mechanical machine makes the data processing will be very easier and then less time consuming. So these are the very advantages of this mechanical data processing. And then the chances of errors will also become very less when compared to the mechanical or manual data processing. And then the third type of the data processing will be electronic data processing. So the processing of data may be used for computers and programs. So previous one is mechanical. So we can able to use this mechanical devices, where here the data electronic data processing means we can able to use of computers. So which should be a little bit faster than the manual one and then mechanical one. So here, the uses of this electronic data processing will be also very will be easy to carry it out for the data processing and compared to the mechanicals device also. So, what are the drawbacks that are present in that mechanical data processing is going to be eliminated in that electronic data processing. So where you can able to process the data by making use of these programs and then uh, and the next one is that real-time processing. So in real-time processing, so here there should be a continual input will be there. So the real-time processing means where we can at the time at a different time intervals are going to get the data, right? So in order to do that, some real-time processing will also be needed, and then some little bit of process also be obtained. So what type of process I can able to do that for that real-time processing, and then output of the data, and then data what I have captured has to be processed in a small stipulated time period. Suppose in between the times less 0 to 10 seconds what the data I'm getting, and 10 seconds to 30 seconds what the data I'm getting, like that. Suppose if I take a bank as an example, so in some 1 to 10 seconds the customer can able to do with transaction of withdrawal. Suppose in another 10 to 30 seconds the customer can able to do the deposit also. So within the stipulated time period, so the customer can able to do different types of transactions and all. So that one will be the real time processing of data. So that one is can able to do this done through this some processes methods are available in order to get the output of that data. So real-time processing is the processing data will be processing the data based on the time intervals, and this should be the continual input is going to be the input for the real-time data processing, and some separate processes are going to be used for output in order to get the output of the data. And then the data is also be processed in some small stipulated time that should be the real time. So the example is that the bank customer can able to withdraw some amount, some of the money from his or her account that should be in a vital role, and that transaction can be processed and account balance should also be updated as soon as the possible. And the next type of data processing will be batch processing. So in batch processing, the group of transactions is going to be collected here over a period of time, and that data is going to be entered and then processed, and then the batch results are going to be produced here. So the batch processing requires a separate programs. So it should be in the form of input, process, and then output, right? So the input is very important, since the data is going to be sent to the multiple transactions as the input for a specific period of time. So that input data is very important. And the processing, so what kind of processing I have to be used in order to process the data that is coming from multiple sources and then multiple batches. So data to be processed 1, 2, 3 should be in batch 1, and process 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 should be under batch 2, like that. How we're going to process the batches simultaneously in a stipulated period of time. So it is also the efficient way of processing high volume of the data, right? So since the data is coming from some primary source in multiple ways, and similarly I can able to get the data from multiple source of secondary data, right? How can able to process? So this types of processing, batch processing technique is very efficient one. So which can able to process the data simultaneously or parallelly. Example, payroll system, examination system, and then billing system. So let me take the inventory stock. So some of the persons who are available in United States and who are available in Australia and then India, they can able to purchase the items simultaneously in order to purchase their items, right, at the same time interval also at the same time. So that type of data should be done through the batch processing. And then what are the important steps that are going to be allowed in order to do that processing the data? So what are the various process steps that have to be followed? So the very first one should be questionnaire checking. So the questionnaire checking is the very first step. So once that one is done, so what kind of questions I can able to get it in order to get the data from the multiple sources. And then once the data is done, that data is going to be edited. This is the second step, editing. So editing is also very important. So that should be either manual editing, or it may be real-time editing, or it may be batch editing. What kind of editing you can able to, that one is you have to be considered based on the type of the application. So once the data editing is done, then we have to start coding of that editing, how the coding is to be done. So how the programs are is going to be written for in order to implement that process that is seen in that different data processing techniques. So once the coding is done, then I have to see the classification. So how the classification is data is to be done. So how can able to present the data, and then how can able to present the data in different ways also I have to think it out. So the classification of the data is very important. So whether that should be qualitative data or it may be quantitative data. So for that quantitative data, what kind of presentations can I able to present it, and then for qualitative data also, what kind of methods that are available for present it I have to be know it. So under this classification, so I can able to send the data to the tabulation. So the tabulation is very important in order to present the data in the form of charts, graphs, or table forms. So tabulation is one of the presentation tool. And then once the tabulation is done, that data is going to be sent to the graphical presentation. So suppose if I take the data in the form of table in Excel, so I can able to convert the data in the graphical views like bar chart, pie chart, like that. So different types of graphical presentations are available, like uh, bar chart, pie chart, right, and then uh, pie diagram also available, like that. Some other different line chart, right, like the different types of charts we are having in order to present the data in graphical representation. And then data cleaning. So once the presentation is done, by seeing this you can analyze the data, so that once the any duplication data, whether the performance results are not getting properly, then the data cleaning step is to be implemented. So once the data step is going to be implemented, so that data cleaning is sent to the data adjustment step. So this should be the very last one. So where you can able to adjust the data in order to get that better results. So let's see the one by phase of this data processing steps. So let's see the first one, that should be questionnaire checking. So questionnaire checking here. So when the data is collected through questionnaires, so the first step of data process is to check the questionnaires if they are accepted or not. So right. So we're going to ask different types of questionnaires and all, right. So that questionnaires should be see whether it should be acceptable one or not an acceptable question or not. So that and also have to be very careful while implementing this questionnaire checking and all. So not accepted, if it is not accepted, so what I have to do? So If it is not accepted means then gives some impression that the respondent could not understand the question. So sometimes the respondent may unable to answer that question or unable to understand the question what the questioner is going to be asked the questions, and then what whether the answer is whether it should be partially incomplete or fully incomplete have to be noted, and then answered by a person who had inadequate knowledge. So the questioner who is asking the respondent he has to be in a position whether whether he is having adequate knowledge or not. I have to be noted properly. If he is having inadequate knowledge, so at that time what will happen? So definitely the questions what is asking by the questionnaire will not get the answers properly, right? So this is the very first one, questionnaire checking. So questionnaire checking means when the data is going to be collected through questionnaires, the first step of data process is should be to check the questions if they are accepted or not. If not accepted, that means it gives the impression about the respondent could not understand the question, or the respondent should have incompletely knowledge or fully knowledge or not. We have to be identified, and adequate knowledge also be part of the respondent, which is not going to be answered for the questionnaire. And the next one is data editing. So data editing is also very important. So once the data is collected from the questionnaires from the respondents, so what we have to do? We have to edit the data. So in what way? So what are the process we are having for in order to edit the data once we collected from the data from the respondents? So for that, the process of examining the data collected in questionnaires or schedules. Through schedules or proper schedule also we can able to edit the data. So in order to perform this data editing, so what we have to do is we have to first detect the errors and then omissions. So where I'm getting the error data, so where the data is going to be omitted, so where the respondents omits the data, so from what questions is omitted, and what is the uh, null data where I'm getting it, that and all we have to be identified in data editing itself, and then we have to correct these kind of errors and omissions wherever it is possible. And then in data editing itself we have to make sure of the schedules and then that are ready for the tabulation or not. So once the data is collected, anything whether editing is done properly is done, then that data is ready for the schedule for the tabulation. Also we have to be see here itself in data editing phase only. And then in data editing, so the editor is responsible for seeing the data, or uh, first one should be accurate data is possible or not, I have to be answered, right? So the data what I'm getting is accurate one or not, I have to be identified first, and then once the accurate data comes, then I have to check whether the consistency with the other facts scheduled. So right, suppose if the data is not consistent, so what I have to do? I have to ask another type of question in order to get that consistent data, and then uniformly entered or not also have to be identified. So in data editing also, once the uniformity is not there, then you have to again re-edit the data, and then you have to be see that editing is as complete as possible. So is there any missing data is available or not, and then so all the errors what I'm getting from the question is properly answered, properly eliminated, properly covered with some unique values, and then whether the data is accurate one, everything I have to be carried out in data editing phase itself. So once that one is acceptable for the tabulation, and then arrange it to facilitate the coding tabulation. So these are the steps on responsibility which is going to be done by the data editor. So the editor in data editing, so what I have to do is, so the process of examining the data collecting from the questionnaires and schedules is going to be identified. So for that what we have to do, we have to detect the errors, and then omissions have to be identified, and we have to correct these the errors what I'm getting from respondents. and then make sure that the schedules are also going to be made ready for the data what I get is ready for the tabulation, and then the editor also going to be responsible for the accurate data, and then the data that should be inconsistent and then uniformly entered or not, and then the data is as complete as possible and then acceptable for the tabulation and arranged to facilitate the coding tabulation. In next slide, we'll see about what are the different types of editing here. So, very first one is that editing for the quality, and second one is that editing for the tabulation, and third one is that field editing, and next one is that central editing. So, these are the various types of editing we are having here in order to get the quality data. So editing for the quality here. So very first one is the editing for the quality. So for that, what you have to do is, so the data form should be complete one and then free of bias, errors, inconsistency and dishonesty. So once this one is going to be eliminated, definitely we're going to get the quality data. So the data from the complete one. So there should not be any incomplete, and then free of bias and free of errors, and then the data should be inconsistency is going to be eliminated, and dishonesty is also going to be eliminated. So once that one is done, then the quality editing we can able to get it. And the next one is that editing for the tabulation. So for that, in order to make for tabulation presentation, so what you have to do, so modification to facilitate to the tabulation is very important. So modification is to be done, and then ignoring extreme high value should also be considered. So extremely high or can able to consider extremely low value is going to be to get edited. So when I'm going to having some missing data or mismatched data that is getting in the data. And the next one is the field editing. So field editing means translating is the first one, and then rewriting is the second one. So field editing is also very important. So I can able to translate it, or I can able to rewrite it. So one that is the type of editing what we are having. And then next one is central editing. So in central editing, so wrong information gathering and then replacements. So all this done, then that should be done by the central editing. So that means this should be the final one. So where the data should be centralized in order to make ready for the tabulation. So for that, wrong data is going to be eliminated, and then replacement is going to be eliminated. Right. So these are the some of the types of editing. So editing for the quality means the data should be in the complete one and then free of bias, errors, inconsistency and honesty. And editing for the tabulation. So editing for the tabulation also done. So it should be modification made to be facilitate table form, and then ignoring extremely high and low values. And then field editing is the one where you can able to translate it and rewriting the data. And then central editing is the one where you can able to fill that wrong data and replacement of the data what I got noticed in that one. And next one is that what is the necessity of that editing here. So what is the use of this editing? So for that, we have to do is to gather information and then to make the data relevant and appropriate for the analysis, and then to find errors and modify them, and then to ensure that the information provided is accurate, and then to establish the consistency of the data, and then to determine whether or not the data are complete, and to obtain the best possible data available. So these are the steps that are needed for the editing purpose. So very first one is that to gather the information. So in order to perform this editing, definitely we need the data that is going to be gathered from the multiple sources. And next one is to make the data relevant one. So the relevant is very important, and that should also be appropriate for the analysis phase in order to go to the next analysis phase, right? And the next one is to find the errors and then modifying them. So finding the errors and modifying them, and then to ensure that the information provided is accurate. So what the information we are providing is the accurate one, that one also is going to be noticed here. And then establish the consistency of the data also, and to determine whether or not the data are complete, and to obtain the best possible data or not. These are the various necessity of the editing. So in this, once the data editing is done, so this is the third one, that should be coding of the data. So the coding of data is very important. So here the process of assigning numericals and other symbols to the answers so that the respondents can be put into a limited number of categories or classes. So the processing of numericals and then symbols, keep it in one place, and then processing it should be a little bit easier. So and then little bit easy also for the coding the data. So normally we have to group all this kind of data into a classes in order to perform the coding here. So once that one is done, so then the translating answers into numerical values and then assigning numbers to the various categories of the variable can be used in the data analysis. So translating of the answers into numerical one and then assigning the numbers to the various categories of the variable to be used in the data analysis. Here, the coding is done by using a code book and then code sheet and a computer code. So the coding is done, we're having different types of methods are available. That should be code book is the one, and the code sheet is the one, and the computer code is the one. So these are the different types of coding techniques of the data we're having. And then the coding is done on the basis of the instructions given in the code book. So coding is also very important. So that should be done on the base of instruction given in the code book. In order to do that coding, so first of all, I have to see whether the code book is there or not. Without seeing this code book, it is difficult to implement the coding. So codebook gives a numerical code for each variable. So the codebook gives the what kind of variable it is, whether it's a numerical variable or it can be a string, whatever it is. And then first one, so the coding of data is very important. The process of assigning numerical values to the other symbols should be easily identified, since as they were going to be in the form of a grouping of categories or classes, and then these answers are going to be translated into the form of numerical values, and then assigning the numbers to the various categories of the variable, and then the coding is to be done. So once the code book is ready, and then we are also having different types of methods that are available to implement the coding, not only the code book, but also we're having the code sheet and one computer code also. And then this coding is to be done based on the instructions how they are provided in the code book, and this code book is able to give the numerical code for the each variable. And this is the some of the example of that code book. So the code book contains the instructions so that are necessary for the information about the variable in the data set. So the code book is also looked at one kind of format here. So where how the coding instructions is to be done, how the information about the variables in the data set will be. Normally, this code book generally contains the following type of information like column number, and then record number, and then what should be the variable number, and what should be the variable name, and then questionnaire number and instruction for coding. So these are the various fields that are available in the code book. So what is the column number, in which column number it is available, and then what is the record number, and then what is the variable number, and then what is the name of that variable, and then what question number. So and then instruction for the coding. So this is the simple view of how the code books looks like here. So there should be some specific formats. So already I discussed regarding how the code book will be in previous videos. Let's go through it that. So here, so creating the code book may contain various elements of the code book. So the very first one should be the variable name. So what is the variable name here? So what type of variable it is? So whether it is a numeric variable or a string variable, and then what missing values. So in order to create the missing values, so what type of variable having that value is missed here. So whether it is a nominal one, it may be ordinal one, or it may be interval one, and it may be ratio square variable one. So here like this, we're having different types of variables, and which one is the value is missed here. And dichotomy. So dichotomy is also one kind of variable which may be able to take either two values here only. So two values means either true or false, or it may be a male on female, and then yes or no, like that. So this type of variables, only two values that are going to be taken by the dichotomy. And then the codes. So the codes is also very important. uh, how the coding is done, whether it should be done manually or through programs which is going coding is done, and all that, and all I have to know it. So these are the various elements of the coding. So whether it may be a variable name, and then type of variable have to be noted in the code book, whether it is a numeric one or the string one, and then missing values are going to be identified. So whether it is levels of measurements also going to be identified, and then whether what type of values is missed, whether it is nominal data, ordinal, interval, ratio, scale. And dichotomy is also very important, and codes also very important. And this is the simple view of the code book here. So here how to know this variable name, and then SPSS variable name to be identified. So SPSS means these are the variables that are available in statistical software or statistical package for social sciences, and what kind of variable it is, how to know it in the form of tables, and the levels of measurements, and then missing values, and then code here. So the variable means ID number, and then name of the variable, and sex, age, and then year of school, like that. These are some different types of variables what examples created in the variable column. And then SPSS variables, so simultaneous ID number is there, right? So I can able to represent in the form of ID and go here, and the name same, X, age, and then year of school I can able to read as Y as school. Now what type of variable? There is a numeric one, where it may be a string one, where it is a numeric, and then numeric. So like this I can able to classify that variables into different types of levels. And what type of level, whether it is a nominal one, whether it is a dichotomy variable, or it may be a ratio scale variable, and then whether it may be ordinal variable, also I can able to identify. So what type of missing values I'm getting here, it may be filled with data or not, or I can able to fill with mixing values or not, I have to be identified here. And then what type of coding, whether it may be a self-coding one, and then properly some codes I can able to assign to, whether it is or not I can able to identify. And this is the simple view of that code book here. And then what is the necessity of the coding? So necessity of coding is very important in order to organize the data code, and then in order to form the structure for the coding, and for the interpretation of the data, and then for the conclusions of the data coded, and then translating answers into numerical values, and then assigning number to the various categories for the data analysis. So it is also necessary for the efficient analysis also. So the necessity of coding means, so we have to organize the code in a organized way. We have to follow some format here, and then we have to provide some structure from the coding, and then interpretation, so that we can able to interpret the data very easily, and then the conclusions of the data encoded should also be easily identified, and then translating the values into numerical values can be done easily. And then we can also assign numbers to various categories of the data analysis, and it is also necessary for the data analysis phase. And the next one is that, so once that one is done, coding is done, we have to clean the data. So data cleaning is to be performed. So it includes consistency checks are going to maintain, and then treatment of missing values. And then although that preliminary consistency checks have been made through during editing phase, then the checks that also be carried out through more thoroughly is to be done, and extensively is to be done. So because they are going to be done through computer, so the computer also there may be some mistakes may be obtained in the data gathering and editing phase. So that one also going to be covered through the data cleaning step. And then some of the computer packages also available like SPSS, SAS, Excel, and Minitab. So these various packages that are available in order to find the data of the variable, whether that should be lies in out of range or not, also can able to clearly identify. So right, so in data cleaning, so the data cleaning includes the consistency check whether, and then the treatment of missing data can also be identified. And then through this data cleaning we can able to perform continuous checking in data editing phase itself, where you can able to perform thorough checks is going to be done, and then extensive checks also be carried out as they are going to be made by the computer. And some of the computer packages also available in order to implement this, and they should be in programmed one like SPSS, SAS, Excel, and all. And then what is the importance of this data screening here? So where we should clean the data in our research process. So the data cleaning and screening is the first step where you can able to perform the data entry and should not start your analysis unless it is going to be do it. So what is the importance of that one? So data screening means it is very easy to make mistakes. So while entering the data, and then some of the errors also can miss upon your analysis, and there may be a chance. So it is also important to spend the time for checking and for the mistake initially rather than trying to repair the damage later. So trying ask the person to check your data properly. So these are the some of the importance of data cleaning and screening steps. So data cleaning and screening is to be very important before going to start analysis. And then so data screening importance means since it is everyone should be able to carry out the missing data and mistakes that may arise, and then some errors may be identified, and a lot of time is going to be needed for checking the mistakes initially. So in order to read the data screening is very important. And some of the data screening steps will be check out the abnormal data, that is the data within out of range we have to be identified from the frequencies table. And then this is the very first step, and then second one is that go back to the original question and then correct them. That is the underway. So these are the two screening steps what you are having. So check out the abnormal data, and then from data within out of the range is going to go identified from frequencies table, and then the question is what they asked previously, right? So go back again and correct the questions again, able to get the correct data. So some of the data cleaning steps will be data missing data, and then normality, linearity, outliers, multicollinearity, and homoscedasticity. So these are some of the data cleaning steps. Already I discussed some of these steps in detail in my videos, so kindly go through it here. And then the last one should be data adjusting. So data adjusting is the final step here. So if any correction that needs to be done for the statistical analysis, so the data adjusted is going to be adjusted accordingly. So the data adjustment is not not always necessary, but it may improve the quality of the analysis sometimes also, right? So these are data adjusting means, so once we having some corrections, so still that is needed for the statistical analysis, and data adjustment is to be done accordingly without changing without formatting the data and all. And data adjusting is not only necessary, but maybe also sometimes it is needed to improve the quality of the analysis. So once all these steps are clear, then we have to perform the data analysis. So that should be about the data processing steps have to be followed in order to start the data analysis. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.